everybody. Welcome to the Abroaders Travel Podcast, your weekly meetup with thousands of entrepreneurs, hustlers, creators, nomads, ninjas, wanderers, and world changers, all seeking to build the skills and connections to live a life without borders. If you want to learn more about what we do or download our entire podcast archive, check out the website, abroaders.com.
Happy Wednesday morning and welcome to another episode of the Abroaders Podcast. This is number 166. I'm Eric, checking in from Sao Paulo, Brazil. And for today's show, I've got a really inspiring and cool interview to share with you guys. I spoke with Seth Stanton from milesformigrants.org. Seth and his team are working to use frequent flyer miles to reunite families who have been accepted for refugee status, but are unable to get together because of not being able to afford airfare. These guys are doing some incredible work, and it was really a pleasure talking with him. So I hope you'll stick around for that conversation. And before we do that, we've got some news and updates for you. All the notes and links from this week's episode can be found at abroaders.com/166.
Hey guys, before we get into the interview with Eric and Seth from Miles for Migrants, I just wanted to let you know that we are not going to be doing any news today. I am here at the airport in Sao Paulo, Guarulhos, in the Star Alliance Lounge. And to be honest with you guys, the stuff that I was putting together is just, there wasn't that much good stuff for you. I kind of listened to it over again and wasn't really thrilled with that. So as opposed to wasting your time with bad content, we're going to cut straight to this interview with Eric and Seth from Miles for Migrants. Sorry we didn't have any good news and updates for you, but in all honesty, folks, what I recorded wasn't that good, and it wasn't really anything that would be all that impactful for you guys. Those stories that it's too late to take action on stuff, or by the time you hear this, it's not going to really be much of an opportunity, and other itsy bitsy stuff that is pretty much everything that we preach against, where we preach against those big wins as opposed to ticky tacky stuff. So hope you enjoy the interview, and next week we should have some more news and updates accumulate, and we should have some time to do a really good job for you. So thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy the interview.
All right, so my guest today is Seth Stanton, who started a nonprofit called Miles for Migrants to help reunite families for folks who have been approved for a visa for family reunification and have refugee status, and he's helping to get their family members back to the country that's taking them in and resettling them, and using frequent flyer miles and donations to help make that happen. Seth, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, I guess first of all, can you just kind of fill in the gaps a little bit? Tell me a little bit more about how all of this works and what you guys do.
So Miles for Migrants acts as essentially a middleman in the process of finding needy people who are refugee families who need to fly certain members to their new approved home, and then finding people who have extra frequent flyer miles that are willing to pledge them to help those people fly. So the way that we do that is on our website, allow people to pledge their miles, whatever extra miles they have that they don't have plans for. And then on the other side, we work with NGOs that are actually on the ground in these various countries that essentially find us our refugees, and then we link the two up and we have your donated miles make that booking. And then kind of on the side of that, we take donations of money because, as I'm sure most of your listeners know, when you do an award booking with frequent flyer miles, there's a charge that covers airport taxes and customs fees and stuff like that. So we have that option of donating money to cover those sorts of expenses too.
Oh, that's great. And I can imagine there's a lot of logistics involved in this. You mentioned even before we started recording for the show that a lot of times the folks that are going to be traveling to reunite with their family members don't necessarily speak English. Tell me a little bit about how the NGOs help coordinate. Is it just sort of finding the people that need this help and you guys are on your own, or how does that interact?
No, the NGOs provide the vast majority of the services, to be honest. We really only handle the frequent flyer miles and booking side of things. So without like a real solid NGO partner, we're essentially nowhere. They not only find these people, they vet their finances. They find translators to tell them about the paperwork that they're signing, right? Because they sign paperwork essentially saying, I understand that I'm receiving this donation. The NGOs, walk the recipients through all of this paperwork, of which there's a fair amount, because you can imagine there's agreements between us and the NGO and us and the recipient, and the NGO has to submit paperwork for each recipient saying where they can fly from and what dates they need to fly and whether there's a hard limit on that because their visa is going to expire and all of these things. And the NGOs keep track of all of that. We've worked with a few at this point, and they're generally really good at it.
Wow, that's really cool. It sounds like you guys are kind of just jumping in to save the day in a certain way with the transportation, because I remember you mentioned to me that, sometimes the visas are really short term, and from the moment you find out you actually have been approved, you only have as little as 30 days to actually figure out how to get your family physically to, the new country that's going to be taking you guys in. So I imagine there's a lot of scrambles when people, get close to the end of that deadline and still haven't been able to get a flight figured out.
That one is specific to the United Kingdom, as far as what we've worked with so far. But it is a 30-day limit from the moment that they tell you that you are approved to reunify your family in the UK until those people who are reunifying have to enter the United Kingdom. And otherwise their visas expire and they actually have to reapply.
Wow.
So yeah, you can imagine, even if you get that news and you don't exactly know where to turn and you ask, an NGO, I need to come and meet with you. I don't know how to get my family to come join, we had this approval. It's amazing, but I don't know how to book these tickets. I don't know how I'm going to pay for these tickets.
Yep.
Then you meet with the NGO. They have to bring in a translator, so they have to schedule the translators come in. I mean, there's so many things. So I gave you one example before we started recording, and in that case, it was an Iranian family where we found out with 10 days left on the visa. And so we had to, make a quick turnaround. We got lucky that our donors have been very responsive. I turned around to one of the donors and I said, look, we need to do this and we need to do it pretty quickly. Right. And he had pledged, in this case, 20,000 British Airways avios. And he said, I'm available tonight. And I said, great. And we literally turned it around that day, and they had tickets by the end of the day for 5 or 6 days later.
Wow. That's something that I think people underestimate a lot too, because, we had this experience for the first time really with the Home for the Holidays campaign this year, where we had, maybe 30 donors that were helping us get people home, and the effort required to coordinate and to be able to either get access to their frequent flyer accounts to use the miles that were donated, or have them, book the ticket and be able to communicate about that. That's a pretty serious undertaking, and certainly really fortunate that you guys are able to step in and do that. And it takes, some sort of specific knowledge. It's not that using points are extremely hard, but especially with short notice, limited availability. And I imagine, that a lot of the countries that people are flying out of aren't the types of places that have a ton of commercial air service. And so the number of seats and things like that are probably more limited as well. And routes are a little bit more difficult to come by.
It's very dependent. One of the other founders, his name is Ryan Booth, is extremely encyclopedic about this sort of thing. It's really impressive, actually. You're right. There's not a ton of air service to some of these places, but the fun thing is that you can go to Ryan and be like, look, we have this thing coming through the pipeline. The paperwork's going to come through today or tomorrow. what do you think? And he will not only know what the best redemption is for that route, but he usually will literally know what flights are available on it. It's really amazing.
Very cool.
Extremely hard to come by, and you will not be the slightest bit surprised that Ryan is a math teacher. So,
awesome. Well,
yeah.
tell me a little bit about how this got on your radar. Like I know that you've been into points and miles for a little while now, but when did this sort of need come to your attention? And tell me a little bit about how you guys started this project.
So this project started in May of 2016. And it started with a post on the credit card churning subreddit that was done by our other co-founders. There are 3 co-founders. And Nick made a post where instead of doing a trip report about how he flew first class on Cathay Pacific and drank 7 bottles of champagne, he made a post about how he reunited a Pakistani Christian family that had been persecuted. They lived in, I believe, northern Pakistan, and they'd been persecuted by the Pakistani Taliban, if I remember correctly. And they ended up in a situation where the husband fled because he felt like his life was threatened. Mm-hmm. And he ended up in Italy, where he was given refugee status. And then his family, which obviously continued to be persecuted because they still lived in the same place, was approved to be reunited with him. And Nick used a bunch of American Airlines miles to reunite them.
Wow.
And so he made this post, and it completely took off. There were all of these people commenting, saying, how do I do something like this? How did you find this guy? Is there anything like this in existence? And Nick and I started talking about this fairly soon after. The answer was no, there really wasn't. And not only that, but Nick personally knew somebody who was very close to this family. Yeah. Or he may have actually known. So anyway, it was an incredible story, but we had to figure out some other way to actually scale it. And so we had these conversations over the summer, and we started kind of essentially cold emailing NGOs and saying, would you be interested in something like this? What do we need to do in order to make something like this a reality? And a lot of them said, hey, that's really cool, but aren't you 2 anonymous guys from the internet? We need to work with an actual organization.
Right.
And so we got to the end of the summer and we said, you know what, let's just do this. We registered the company and we applied for nonprofit status, and that came through in October. And we pretty much immediately turned around and started flying people after that. That's actually
awesome. And so is it just the 3 of you still on the team? Have you guys added any staff?
Staff is kind of a tough way to put it because nobody gets paid.
Sure.
But there's the 3 of us, and we've been very lucky to get a few other people that have kind of jumped in where I guess I would say we are deficient, right? Because all 3 of us come from a, points and miles, travel redemptions, credit card churning background, right? And we don't really have any expertise in how to run a nonprofit or how startups work or where our priorities should be.
Sure.
And so we have a few other people who have kind of joined us since then. A guy named Andy Friedman, who has worked with a number of startups throughout his career, kind of immediately just found us and jumped in and has been instrumental in finding us other people that were willing to jump in. He found us a law firm that took us on pro bono and did all of our incredibly complex paperwork. As you can imagine, we're signing an international agreement with an NGO about providing services. And then on top of that, we're, signing agreements with the recipient. We're signing agreements with the donor. we have a non-disclosure agreement, because if you provide miles and fly someone, then, a lot of times, unfortunately, that person's family is possibly threatened by the fact that they fled the country. And so, if you donate miles, you'll find out that whoever you flew made it safely. Any information that you find out that's more than that, it's kind of a bonus. You don't, it's one of those things where you agree when you donate your miles that you're not going to disclose anybody's name or the exact date that they traveled or things like that because of the security risk of it all.
Yeah, well, I can totally imagine that that's, a very sensitive topic. And, it's just great that you guys have been able to wade through some of the legal obstacles that are make it challenging to be able to facilitate that. But
we've been really lucky with it. The law firm they're called K&L Gates, and they're amazing. And I am forever thankful that they took us on, because otherwise we totally would not have been able to do this. And so anyway, we have, volunteer people that want to do some PR work, and somebody who wants to run our Twitter and Facebook accounts in a much better way than I had been doing it. And, awesome. Things like that.
That's great.
So
we'll definitely link to all of your accounts and so people can pick up and follow you on social media, as well as your website in the show notes for today's episode. What do you think is what are the things that would have to happen for you guys to be able to scale this up? What's the slowest hiker or the limiting factor? Is it resources, just miles and cash to be able to provide the service for more people, or something else?
I would say it's probably resource dependent. It's probably how many miles can we have pledged, and how many dollars do we have to cover taxes and fees. There are some other things that are kind of very short-term structural. I know that our website needs a little work, although I'm happy to have any of you submit a contact form telling me what parts of it are crappy. I know that needs a little work, and we have some agreements with various NGOs that we're kind of working our way through. So right now we're really only fully eligible to fly people with two NGOs, one based in the UK and one based in Turkey. But we're kind of working our way through some contract stuff with some other NGOs that are larger and scaling up. So it's very quickly going to be limited by the number of miles that are pledged, essentially, because it's certainly not going to be limited by the number of refugee families that need to be reunited. I'll put it that way.
Well, man, this is a really cool project. And I mean, we love Points and Miles. All of our listeners are sort of, working on saving up for the next trip. And it's really nice to kind of bring things back with some perspective, that, there's folks that are, potentially in desperate need of a little bit of help that could be life-changing. And the fact that you guys are volunteering your time and, going through all the, it's basically the challenges of a startup, without the making money part, which is, it's just incredible. So, kudos to you guys for taking on this challenge. And hopefully, some of our listeners that don't have travel coming up quite as quickly can reach out and be able to help sponsor getting somebody back to reunite with their family.
Yeah, thanks.
Awesome. Well, so folks can help out with the project by going to milesformigrants.org. That's the number 4. And we're going to have all the links in the show notes again, so you can just hop over and check that out and make a cash donation or donate some miles and help these great people get families reunited. Seth, thank you so much for joining me for the show. It was really great having you.
Thanks so much.
All right, that's going to do it for this week's show. Thank you so much for being with us. If you would like to support Seth and the Miles for Migrants mission to help reunite families, you can find all the links that we mentioned in the show at abroaders.com/166.
Hey, Broaders, don't be shy. Hop over to the website and join our email list for exclusive travel hacking content. If you like what we're up to, the best way you can support the show is by leaving us a 5-star review on iTunes. Lastly, we would love to hear from you, so send your show feedback to Eric or AJ at